For nearly 5 decades, fans of Little House on the Prairie have wondered about the real relationship between its two leading ladies. The rumors have swirled for years, whispered about in fan forums, and hinted at in interviews. But now, at 61 years old, Melissa Gilbert has finally broken her silence about what really went down between her and Melissa Sue Anderson on the set of America's most beloved family show. And what she revealed has left fans absolutely stunned. The truth is far more complicated than anyone imagined. It's a story of two young girls thrust into the harsh spotlight of fame, forced to play loving sisters while navigating jealousy, insecurity, and the crushing weight of Hollywood expectations. What Gilbert has shared changes everything we thought we knew about those idyllic Prairie years. From the moment they first met during auditions in 1974, Melissa Gilbert and Melissa Sue Anderson were destined for a complex relationship. Over 500 children competed for roles in the new NBC series based on Laura Ingalls Wilder's beloved books. When the dust settled, two Melissas would play the Ingalls sisters, creating an immediate problem that nobody anticipated. Michael Landon, who played their father Charles Ingalls and served as the show's creative force, immediately recognized the confusion their shared names would cause. He gathered both girls and made a decision that would set the tone for years to come. Anderson would be called Missy, while Gilbert bristled at the nickname, insisting she hated it and wanted to be called Melissa. This small moment of resistance hinted at the underlying tension that would simmer throughout their time together. But the name situation was just the surface. Gilbert has admitted in her memoir Prairie Tale that from their very first meeting something felt off. She described Anderson as strikingly pretty in a way that made her feel insecure about her own appearance. While Gilbert saw herself as the tomboy who climbed trees and played rough, Anderson embodied a different kind of beauty, one that was refined, controlled, and seemingly effortless. The contrast between them couldn't have been more stark. Gilbert sensed a distance in Anderson that she couldn't penetrate. There was a coldness, she wrote, though she sometimes wondered if she simply never learned how to break through Anderson's carefully constructed walls. The young Laura Ingalls actress wore her emotions like a neon sign, while Anderson kept everything locked away behind a mysterious reserve. For a child desperate for connection, Anderson's emotional unavailability must have felt like rejection. The tension wasn't just in Gilbert's imagination. Cast members noticed it too. Allison Arngrim, who played the deliciously nasty Nellie Oleson, later wrote about Gilbert's feelings toward Anderson in her own tell-all memoir. According to Arngrim, Gilbert didn't hide her emotions about her on-screen sister. She quoted Gilbert as warning others about Anderson, calling her dangerous and evil, words shockingly harsh for one child to use about another. What drives someone to such extreme language? Gilbert has since explained that she felt Anderson was cold and bratty, difficult to connect with both personally and professionally. While viewers at home saw two sisters sharing tender moments on screen, behind the camera, there was an entirely different dynamic playing out. Gilbert described Anderson's reserve as apparent both on and off screen, creating an atmosphere that made genuine connection nearly impossible. Part of the issue stemmed from their vastly different maturity levels. Almost overnight, it seemed to Gilbert, Anderson transformed from a child into something resembling an adult. Suddenly, Anderson had long fingernails while Gilbert nervously bit hers. Anderson wore makeup, smoked cigarettes, and drank Tab Cola like a sophisticated teenager. She occupied a different universe entirely, one that the younger, more innocent Gilbert couldn't access or understand. The situation was complicated further by Anderson's mother, who frequently visited the set. Gilbert noticed that Marian Anderson kept her daughter close, creating what she described as a contained, controlled, private bubble around Melissa Sue. The mother-daughter bond was so intense that Gilbert observed Anderson being her mother's entire universe. She even recalled seeing Marian Anderson's license plate reading 3 Missy, a testament to how central her daughter was to her identity. This protective maternal presence may have contributed to Anderson's distance from the rest of the cast. While other child actors bonded and played together between takes, Anderson remained separate, attached to her mother in a way that prevented the casual friendships that normally develop on set. For Gilbert, who craved that sisterly connection both on and off camera, Anderson's unavailability must have felt like a constant rejection. The resentment built over time. In a later appearance on Watch What Happens Live with Andy Cohen, Gilbert made a shocking revelation about a physical altercation between them. She claimed that Anderson deliberately elbowed her off a wagon during filming, an act that seemed to confirm all of Gilbert's worst suspicions about her co-star's true feelings. Whether this was an accident or intentional, Gilbert clearly interpreted it as hostile, another piece of evidence in her mental case against Anderson. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. When Anderson finally published her own memoir in 2010, titled The Way I See It, fans expected her side of the conflict to emerge. They anticipated revelations, accusations, or at least acknowledgement of the tension that Gilbert had described so vividly. Instead, they got something far more surprising. Anderson barely mentioned Gilbert at all. In interviews promoting her book, Anderson made a statement that shocked fans more than any dramatic accusation could have. When asked why Gilbert was largely absent from her memoir, Anderson gave a simple, devastating answer. She honestly didn't have many memories of the two of them together. They were very, very different, she explained, leaving it at that. No drama, no accusations, no counter-narrative, just nothing. The omission spoke volumes. While Gilbert had spent years wrestling with feelings about Anderson, apparently Anderson hadn't given Gilbert much thought at all. It wasn't malice or coldness necessarily. It was indifference. For someone who had built up Anderson as a significant figure in her life story, this revelation must have been difficult for Gilbert to process. How do you reconcile years of complicated feelings with the discovery that you barely registered in someone else's memory? Anderson did offer insight into why she kept her distance from everyone on set, not just Gilbert. In a 1981 interview when she announced her departure from the show, Anderson explained her approach to working with her co-stars. She expressed that while she would miss the people and called them friends, she made clear they weren't family. There was a boundary she maintained, a professional distance that served her well but perhaps prevented deeper connections from forming. Anderson's decision to leave Little House after 7 seasons sparked immediate speculation. Rumors flew that she departed because of conflicts with Gilbert and Allison Arngrim. Tabloids had a field day with stories of a massive blow-up between the young actresses. Anderson vehemently denied these claims, stating that the story of any big fight was absolutely false. She explained that Arngrim was leaving due to contract disputes with producers, while her own departure stemmed from exhaustion with her character's storyline. By the time Anderson left in 1981, her character Mary had endured blindness, lost a child in a devastating fire, suffered a miscarriage, and faced every imaginable hardship. There simply wasn't much more tragedy left to inflict on poor Mary Ingalls. Anderson felt she had done everything possible with the role, and it was time to move on. She was ready to pursue her career on her own terms, free from the constraints of a character that had defined her entire adolescence. The separation might have brought relief to both actresses. For years they had been forced into intimate proximity, playing loving sisters while navigating their complicated real-world relationship. The professional demands of television production required them to put aside personal feelings and deliver convincing performances week after week. That kind of emotional labor takes a toll, especially on young people still developing their own identities. Adding another layer of complexity was the professional recognition Anderson received that Gilbert did not. Anderson was nominated for an Emmy for her work on Little House, becoming the only cast member from the series to receive that honor. She also won an Emmy for her performance in an ABC after-school special. While Gilbert was undoubtedly the star of the show, playing the central character around whom most storylines revolved, Anderson received the critical acclaim. For a young actress already grappling with insecurity, watching her co-star receive accolades she wasn't getting must have stung deeply. The pressure of child stardom affected both girls profoundly, though in different ways. Gilbert has been remarkably open about her struggles during those years. She later revealed that she suffered from misophonia, a condition where certain sounds trigger intense emotional and physical responses. On set during classroom scenes, the sound of kids chewing gum or tapping their fingers on desks would make her want to flee. Her eyes would fill with tears and she'd sit there feeling miserable and guilty for hating people she actually loved. Gilbert described this as a really dark and difficult part of her childhood. She thought she was rude, a bad person with character flaws that made her react so strongly to normal sounds. The guilt was crushing. Only as an adult did she learn her condition had a name and that she wasn't defective. But as a child working alongside Anderson, Gilbert was battling internal demons nobody understood, adding another layer of stress to an already fraught relationship. Anderson dealt with the pressure differently. Her strategy seemed to be withdrawal, creating boundaries that protected her from the chaos and demands of fame. While this approach may have preserved her mental health, it also isolated her from potential support systems. The very qualities that helped Anderson maintain her composure, her reserve and control, were the same qualities that made her seem cold and unapproachable to Gilbert. Years passed after Little House ended its run in 1983. Both women went on to build their own lives and careers far from Walnut Grove. Gilbert married 3 times, first to actor Bo Brinkman, then to Bruce Boxleitner, and finally finding lasting happiness with Timothy Busfield. She had children, competed on Dancing with the Stars, even ran for Congress before health issues forced her withdrawal. She wrote her memoir, continued acting, and eventually moved to upstate New York, where she now raises chickens and grows vegetables. Anderson's path took her in a completely different direction. She married television writer and producer Michael Sloan in 1990, and the couple moved to Montreal in 2002, eventually becoming Canadian citizens in 2007. She stepped back from acting to focus on her family, raising 2 children, Piper and Griffin. When she did return to the public eye, it was on her own terms, appearing occasionally at fan events, but generally maintaining the privacy she had always valued. The 2 women existed in separate orbits for decades. They gave occasional interviews where reporters inevitably asked about their relationship, but mostly they avoided each other. The wounds from childhood, real or imagined, hadn't healed simply because time had passed. Both seemed content to leave the past exactly where it was. Then something shifted. At 61, Melissa Gilbert decided it was time to speak openly about her relationship with Melissa Sue Anderson, approaching the subject with a maturity and perspective that only age can provide. Her recent reflections reveal a woman who has done significant emotional work to understand not just Anderson but herself and the dynamics that created their complicated bond. Gilbert now acknowledges the unique pressure they were under as child stars. Being thrown into fame and public scrutiny at such young ages created a connection that was both intense and deeply unusual. They shared something most people could never understand: the experience of growing up in front of millions of viewers, having their childhood documented and judged by strangers. That should have brought them together. Instead, it amplified all the normal childhood insecurities and competitions into something much more complicated. With the wisdom of age, Gilbert recognizes that what she interpreted as coldness from Anderson might have been self-protection. Different children respond to stress in different ways. Where Gilbert needed connection and emotional expression, Anderson needed boundaries and control. Neither approach was wrong. They were simply incompatible. 2 people with fundamentally different needs trying to navigate an extraordinary situation. Gilbert has also been honest about her own role in their dynamic. She admits to jealousy and insecurity, acknowledging that her feelings about Anderson were colored by her own struggles with self-worth. When you're a child constantly comparing yourself to others, especially someone who seems to have everything you lack, it's easy to build that person into a villain in your own narrative. Anderson's beauty, talent, professional recognition, and apparent maturity triggered all of Gilbert's deepest insecurities. The age she's reached now allows Gilbert to look back with compassion, both for Anderson and for her younger self. She can see the whole picture with clarity, appreciating their shared history, including both the good moments and the challenging ones, without needing to defend herself or prove anything to anyone. That kind of perspective is hard-won, requiring years of reflection and personal growth. Gilbert emphasizes that there was never truly animosity or ill will between them in the way outsiders imagined. It wasn't a dramatic feud with screaming matches and betrayals. It was something more subtle and perhaps more painful. 2 people who should have been close but simply couldn't connect. Sometimes that happens, Gilbert explains. You can care for someone deeply and still need to find yourself apart from them. Relationships don't always conform to the patterns we expect, especially those formed under extraordinary circumstances. What Gilbert wants people to understand now is that friendship isn't just about circumstance. Being thrown together on a television set doesn't automatically create bonds any more than being assigned seats next to each other in school guarantees best friendship. Real connection requires compatibility, timing, and shared experiences that resonate on a deeper level. She and Anderson shared some of the most formative years of their lives together, and that bond will always exist, but it looks different than people expected. There's a bittersweet quality to Gilbert's reflections. She seems to mourn not what was lost between them, but what never had a chance to develop. Two girls who should have been allies, who could have supported each other through the unique challenges of child stardom, instead remained strangers sharing a screen. The missed opportunity for genuine friendship adds a layer of sadness to the story. Yet Gilbert also expresses immense respect and admiration for Anderson's talents and character. She calls Anderson one of the most genuine, talented people she's ever known. Working alongside her taught Gilbert about professionalism, patience, and the power of quiet strength. Even without personal closeness, Anderson influenced Gilbert's development as both an actress and a person. Sometimes the people who challenge us most teach us the most valuable lessons. The larger context of Hollywood's treatment of child actors adds another dimension to their story. Both Gilbert and Anderson were products of an industry that routinely exploited young talent while offering insufficient support for their emotional development. They were expected to work adult hours, handle adult responsibilities, and navigate complex interpersonal dynamics while still being children themselves. The fact that they struggled in their relationship isn't surprising. The surprising thing is that they both survived and thrived despite the system. Recent years have brought some reconciliation, at least publicly. In 2024, both women attended the Monte Carlo Television Festival along with other Little House cast members, marking one of their first public appearances together in years. Photographs show them smiling alongside Alison Arngrim, Matthew Laborto, and other co-stars, united in celebration of the show that defined their childhoods. Whether private conversations happened during that reunion remains unknown, but the willingness to appear together suggests at least a détente, if not warmth. The fan response to Gilbert's revelations has been mixed. Some feel vindicated in their longtime suspicions that all wasn't well behind the scenes. Others feel disappointed, wishing the real-life relationship matched the on-screen sisterly love. Many simply appreciate Gilbert's honesty and maturity in addressing a topic she could have easily avoided. Her willingness to be vulnerable and acknowledge her own flaws in the dynamic has earned respect. What's particularly striking about Gilbert's perspective now is her refusal to paint Anderson as a villain. She easily could have used this opportunity to settle scores or present herself as the wronged party in their relationship. Instead, she offers a nuanced view that acknowledges both women's humanity. Anderson wasn't evil or cruel, she was just different, dealing with the same impossible situation in her own way. That kind of generous interpretation requires significant emotional maturity. Gilbert's decision to speak now at 61 wasn't random. She's at a stage of life where reflection comes naturally, where the urgency of old wounds has faded, and where truth matters more than image. She spent years in therapy, worked through her own issues, found stable love, and built a life that satisfies her. From that place of security, she can look back at her younger self with compassion and understand Anderson in ways she couldn't when they were both just struggling kids. The story of the two Melissas serves as a reminder of the cost of fame, particularly for children. The public sees the finished product, the sweet episodes of Little House on the Prairie, where Laura and Mary Ingalls support each other through every challenge. They don't see the real girls behind those characters, carrying burdens no child should have to bear, trying to navigate impossible social dynamics while cameras captured their every move. Both women have spoken in various interviews about different aspects of the Little House experience. Gilbert has been particularly open about Michael Landon, describing both his genius as a creator and his flaws as a person. She's discussed his drinking, his complicated personal life, and the iron control he maintained over every aspect of the show. Anderson has also addressed Landon's mean streak and controlling nature, though she balanced criticism with respect for his talent and acknowledgement of his troubled childhood. The show's impact on both their lives cannot be overstated. For 9 seasons, Little House on the Prairie was not just their job but their entire world. They grew from children to young adults in front of the camera, missing out on normal childhood experiences while gaining fame and financial success. Every awkward phase, every mistake, every triumph was documented and broadcast to millions. The intensity of that experience bonds people in ways outsiders can't fully comprehend, even when it doesn't create traditional friendship. Gilbert's honesty about the relationship also speaks to larger themes about women and competition. Society often pits women against each other, particularly in Hollywood, where there are limited roles and constant comparisons. Two actresses playing sisters would naturally be compared, their looks, talents, and popularity measured against each other. Add in the insecurity of adolescence and the pressure of being child stars, and you have a recipe for complicated feelings. The fact that Gilbert can now articulate these dynamics with such clarity is testament to her personal growth. She recognizes how the industry and circumstances set them up for conflict, how her own insecurities colored her perceptions, and how Anderson's different coping mechanisms weren't attacks on Gilbert personally. That level of self-awareness is rare and valuable. Looking at both women's lives today, it's clear they each found their own version of success and happiness. Gilbert remains in the public eye, taking acting roles that interest her, running her modern Prairie lifestyle brand, and spending time with her 8 grandchildren. She's embraced aging naturally, letting her hair go gray and removing her breast implants, rejecting Hollywood's impossible beauty standards. Her recent work includes advocacy for animal rights and speaking openly about her health challenges, including her misophonia diagnosis and spinal surgery. Anderson chose a quieter path, prioritizing privacy and family over continued fame. She acts occasionally but mostly focuses on her life in Canada with her husband and children. She's maintained the boundaries and control that always characterized her personality, living on her own terms away from the Hollywood spotlight. Her memoir gave fans insight into her Little House years, but she's been selective about what else she shares publicly. There's no right or wrong in their different choices. Both found what worked for them, carved out lives that provide fulfillment and meaning beyond their childhood fame. The parallel nature of their journeys, together but separate, continues even decades after Little House ended. They remain connected by their shared past while leading entirely independent present lives. For fans of Little House on the Prairie, learning about the real relationship between the two Melissas doesn't diminish the show's magic. If anything, it adds depth and complexity to what was already a rich piece of television history. Knowing that the actresses playing sisters struggled with their own relationship while delivering convincing performances of sisterly love actually makes their work more impressive. They were professionals even as children, setting aside personal feelings to serve the story. The show's themes of family, perseverance, and love continue to resonate with audiences worldwide. Little House remains a cultural touchstone, introducing new generations to the Ingalls family's struggles and triumphs on the American frontier. That the real-life relationships behind the scenes were complicated doesn't change the genuine emotions and important stories the show conveyed. Art and reality exist separately, and the art they created together still has value regardless of their personal dynamic. Gilbert's final thoughts on the matter emphasize acceptance and understanding. She and Anderson shared something remarkable, something that shaped both their lives profoundly. They were little girls thrown into an adult world, asked to do things no children should have to do, and they both survived and even thrived. The bond between them exists not in spite of their differences, but because of them. They witnessed each other's struggles, even if they couldn't comfort each other through them. The story reminds us that people are complex, relationships are messy, and childhood is difficult even without the added pressure of fame. Gilbert and Anderson were both doing their best in an impossible situation. They weren't enemies, but they weren't friends either. They were something more complicated, two people whose lives were intertwined by circumstance, creating a connection that defied easy categorization. As Gilbert enters her 60s, she seems at peace with the complexity of her relationship with Anderson. She's no longer trying to make sense of something that doesn't need to make sense, no longer searching for closure in a situation that doesn't have a neat resolution. Life is messy, and relationships don't always tie up with satisfying endings. Sometimes two people just exist in each other's orbit, close but separate, connected but apart. The final revelation, perhaps, is that there is no shocking truth, No dramatic secret that explains everything. The truth is simply that two very different girls were put in an extraordinary situation and handled it the best they could. They didn't become best friends. They didn't have a dramatic falling out. They just existed together in a complicated, nuanced relationship that was simultaneously significant and distant. And now, decades later, they can each look back and understand that what happened between them or didn't happen was okay. They survived, they succeeded, and they each found their own path forward. For Gilbert, speaking about Anderson now isn't about rehashing old conflicts or seeking validation. It's about honoring the full truth of her experience, acknowledging both the challenging aspects and the things she learned. It's about giving her younger self permission to have had complicated feelings while forgiving both herself and Anderson for their inability to overcome the circumstances working against them. Most importantly, it's about recognizing that the story of the two Melissas is ultimately a human story, one filled with the same insecurities, misunderstandings, and missed connections that characterize so many relationships. The legacy of Little House on the Prairie endures, watched and loved by millions around the world. Within that legacy, the real story of Melissa Gilbert and Melissa Sue Anderson adds a layer of poignant reality. They were two talented actresses who created something beautiful together even though they couldn't create a friendship. And perhaps that's the most honest, most human truth of all. Sometimes you can work alongside someone, respect them, even care about them, and still never truly connect. And that's okay. Life isn't a television show where everything resolves neatly by the end of the episode. Sometimes you just have to accept what was and what wasn't, and move forward with grace.